Have a very nice evening, everybody.
KATU's Weather on the Hour is brought to you by Teplic Laser Surgery Centers. Your vision for the future.
On World News Tonight this Friday, Turkey gets hit with another earthquake, close to where thousands of people died 3 months ago. A rocket attack in Pakistan. The U.S. was the likely target. Many people in the region think America is the enemy. On Egypt Air, the engines shut down. The question is, why? Technology on the cutting edge tonight, designing robots that change their shape to suit the purpose, and the plague of the 20th century, when the world got the flu.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. In Turkey tonight, they may well be asking themselves, why us? Why again? Another earthquake, 7.2 on the Richter scale this time. Its center was about 115 miles east of Istanbul in the town of Düzce. In August, 17,000 people died during an earthquake in Turkey in about the same area. So this one struck a nation already on edge. And it is possible, from reports we're getting tonight, that hundreds have died this time. Here's ABC's Mike Lee.
In the town of Bolu, near the epicenter tonight, in the immediate aftermath of the quake, many buildings collapsed. Hysteria and panic. There were only a handful of people out in the open. That means many, maybe most of the people in this community alone could be trapped or buried. Sister, sister, he cries, answer me if you can. There is no answer. The man was beside himself with grief. In this collapsed building, a man is half buried. Fires burned in several communities. A major road was reported torn apart. At this apartment house, there were frantic efforts to find enough water to put out a small fire, but it was too difficult to reach. This house is on fire with children in it, she says. Why isn't anyone here to help us? In the first few hours, there were no official rescue or fire crews in sight, only a few local farmers with their tractors. This area was also hit by the August 17th quake, which devastated dozens of towns and killed 17,000 people, many of them still forced to live in tents and other shelters. By late tonight, rescue and medical teams began to arrive. Some victims were pulled free, but it appears that many more will not survive Turkey's latest massive natural disaster. Mike Lee, ABC News, London.
Outside Turkey, many people had the same reaction Turks probably had. Why two such large earthquakes in roughly the same area in such a short period of time? Here's ABC's Ned Potter with an answer.
All too often, said a geologist, one earthquake begets another, and that may be what happened in Turkey. It sits on a section of the Earth's crust called the Anatolian Plate, sandwiched right between the much larger plates that support Europe and Africa.
And what's happening is Africa is moving up toward this relatively stationary Europe and shoving the Anatolian Plate along the Anatolian Fault.
This fault has had a series of 6 earthquakes, each about magnitude 7 or larger, since 1939.
Generally, the quakes have progressed from east to west in a line along the Anatolian Fault. Geologists believe that often, when one quake happens, it relieves the tension that had built up between the plates on either side of the fault. But it may make things worse further down the fault line.
This particular earthquake started where the previous earthquake in August 17 had stopped.
So this disaster comes right in a region where people were rebuilding from the last one. And this is not the last time that part of the world will be in such a crisis.
What we don't know is the time interval between these large earthquakes occurring.
Earthquakes do not merely happen in places where conditions are ripe for them. Instead, one can cause another and then another. Ned Potter, ABC News, New York.
In other news today, there's been another development in the investigation of Egypt Air. As investigators analyze the information from the flight data recorder, they remain convinced that someone in the cockpit had a direct role in what happened to the aircraft. The National Transportation Safety Board said earlier this week that the plane was flying at 33,000 feet when the autopilot disengaged, and 8 seconds later, the plane began to dive. Picking up the story today, once again, Lisa Stark.
Tonight, the NTSB says the power to the plane's engines was pulled back before its dive toward the ocean, which is consistent with emergency procedures for a rapid descent. During the dive, the plane reaches 0 Gs, meaning anything loose in the cabin would begin floating. Passengers would feel weightless. Halfway through the dive, the plane reaches its maximum operating speed, just under the speed of sound, and master warnings activate.
A master warning is one that indicates a potentially major problem with the airplane that the flight crew must attend to immediately.
Among those problems are depressurization and fire. But since that master warning signal did not go off at the start of the dive, it is less likely now that that is what caused the pilots to start their sudden descent. The warning would also go off if the plane begins overspeeding, approaching its maximum permissible speed. Investigators know that happened. At this point, the G-forces change, indicating the plane is not diving as steeply. Someone is pulling up the nose. Passengers would feel pushed, forced back into their seats. Then someone in the cockpit shuts off both engines. Aviation experts say pilots would only do that in flight if they feel they were losing engine power and were preparing for an in-flight restart.
Obviously, these data raise many questions.
Indeed they do. Now this brings the plane down to about 18,000 feet, but investigators have some 5 more seconds of usable data they have yet to analyze. And also tonight, the search continues for that critical cockpit voice recorder. Weather conditions are expected to be good this weekend. They will look throughout the weekend.
Thanks
Peter?
very much, Lisa. You refer to aviation experts. Let's turn again to our aviation specialist, John Nance. John, how would the engine's start lever get to the off position? That's the first thing I'd like to know.
There's only one way, Peter, and that is if a human hand placed them in that position. There's no other way for them to travel to the off position.
So this is why you think there was pilot involvement?
There had to be pilot involvement, but what it was, whether somebody was intending to restart those engines or something else, is where the puzzle lies.
Any idea of the something else? Why would a pilot move the lever?
The only one reason would be if the engines had stagnated. This is a problem that should not be here anymore, but it happened early on in the 767's history.
Stagnated?
If they got too slow.
Stagnated?
Yeah, you push the throttles up and the engines aren't coming with it, and you need to restart them.
Okay, so that's the only basis on which a pilot would reach to the lever to turn it off?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, John. 1 inch or 1 step forward, it's hard to tell. Now, some other news. In Pakistan this morning, someone fired rockets at several targets, including United Nations headquarters and the American embassy. The rockets appear to have missed their primary targets. Those 6 people who were simply in the way were injured. Tonight, in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, and in Washington, there's a lot of interest in who might have done it. Here's ABC's Sheila McVicker.
It was clearly a coordinated attack. At 18 minutes past 11, say witnesses, 6 rockets were fired from homemade launchers concealed inside these cars. The apparent targets, the well-fortified U.S. Embassy and the American Cultural Center a few blocks away. A Pakistani security guard was among the injured. No Americans were hurt. There were no claims of responsibility today, but there is no shortage of people in the region with a grudge against the United States. Supporters of Osama bin Laden, wanted by the U.S. as a terrorist. Supporters of the Taliban movement, which rules neighboring Afghanistan and shelters Mr. bin Laden. UN sanctions against Afghanistan will be imposed this Sunday if the Taliban do not hand bin Laden over. Just 4 days ago, the Taliban leader warned of earthquakes and storms.
It's a barbaric way to send a message, if that's what it is.
And several fundamentalist groups in Pakistan have threatened recently and frequently to target Americans. U.S. officials are well aware that they are very fortunate that those 6 rockets today did so little damage. Sheila McVicker, ABC News, London.
One other possible disaster overseas today in Kosovo. A United Nations relief plane is lost north of the capital, Pristina. 24 people are on board. UN officials do not know what happened to them, but they're concerned because it appears to have gone lost in an area that is quite heavily mined. When we come back, we're going to go to Atlanta because a Georgia school system's new test for students is making many parents very upset. And designing a new kind of robot that moves like it's alive. Technology tonight on The Cutting Edge.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Gateway.
About free computers, but we haven't actually seen one. Not one with a monitor, 24-hour tech support, and a year of AOL included, like a Gateway PC with an Intel Celeron processor. Call 1-800-GATEWAY. For $28 a month, it's a PC you can believe in.
5 things to consider about the Chevy Impala. It's new. It starts under $20,000. It's designed, engineered, and built to be carefree. It's at your Chevy dealer now. It's received the highest frontal crash rating possible. 5 stars from the federal government. The new Chevy Impala. As USA Today put it, it's a lot more car than you imagine, at a lower price than you expect. The new Chevy Impala.
Let's go for a drive. There's nothing like the way I feel after a good night's sleep. That's why I love my Tylenol PM. For me, there's just no reason to have trouble sleeping. I take Tylenol PM before bed. It stops my pain and helps me sleep. So I'm ready for another great day.
Choosing a cranberry juice is confusing.
Premium cocktail, 27% juice, corn syrup. Avoid the confusion. Trust Northland to always be 100% juice.
Northland is pure genius.
Northland, always 100% juice.
We never thought we'd use OnStar for snakes.
I just hate snakes.
Yeah, traveling through Arizona, we blew a front tire. It shot off the road, and I looked down at the ground. It is crawling rattlesnakes.
It was unbelievable.
I pushed the OnStar button. Within seconds, the OnStar advisor pinpointed our location and sent a tow truck.
Call the paramedics.
Yeah, and kept talking, because we
hate snakes.
Yeah.
The one-touch connection to people who can help.
OnStar.
Call 1-800-OnStar-7.
There is a very big education debate shaping up in Georgia that the rest of the country may want to pay attention to. Near Atlanta, a large school district has just approved a very controversial method for promoting children from one grade to the next. The district is going to use a single exam, one test, to measure a year's worth of education and effort. Here's ABC's Rebecca Chase.
The school board's controversial decision to rely solely on the Gateway test led hundreds of parents to protest.
Are you listening? The issue is Gateway should be an evaluation tool, one of many.
Students take the test in the 4th and 7th grade. Parents worried that one high-stakes test to decide promotion is too much pressure for young children.
My son is in the 4th grade and makes A's and B's, but has cried himself to sleep several times because he's terrified of failing this test.
School officials respond that students who fail the test can retake it or appeal to a review board, but they stand by the test.
This test is a valid and reliable test. It will measure how well a student is learning the curriculum.
School officials insist the test is vital to raising standards in Georgia's largest school system, but many parents say the emphasis on the test has their children turned off school.
Why can't y'all let these children be children? They're begging me!
Despite parents' concerns, the school board says they expect 95% of all students to pass the controversial test. Rebecca Chase, ABC News, Atlanta.
On the money tonight, productivity. In the 3rd quarter of this year, that's from July to October, productivity went up at the fastest rate in nearly 2 years, 4.2%. This means basically that businesses are increasing output without higher production costs, which helps to keep inflation low. President Clinton has signed a bill repealing laws going back to the Depression that prevented banks from selling stocks and insurance. The likely effect is more mergers among insurance companies, brokerage houses, and banks. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 174 points to close at 10,769. On the NASDAQ, stocks were up more than 23 points. When we come back, a new generation of robots. Technology on the cutting edge.
ago, I wouldn't have considered doing this. Today, it's a different story.
Introducing PharmaSure Joint Formula, scientifically formulated with ingredients that help rebuild and renew existing knee and hip cartilage.
99, 100. Phew, we made it.
Grandma, where's Bunny?
Oh, you're kidding.
PharmaSure, inspired by life, created by science. Only at GNC, Rite Aid, and Drugstore.com.
I knew I was in for the fight of my life, but I was ready.
When my husband and his friends start exchanging fish stories, it's the phone bill that can turn into a whopper.
I fought this monster for hours. First I had the upper hand, then he took control.
That's why we always dial 10-10-321. With 10-10-321, calls over 10 minutes are 50% off. That's just 8 cents a minute. Daytime, nighttime, anytime.
I'll tell you, it was like a whale.
Yeah?
You should have seen it.
Well, let me tell you about my trip.
Dial 10-10-321 and talk as long as you want, whenever you want.
When you were a kid, did you carry a lunchbox? Who was on it? Was it Sir Isaac Newton? Was it Abraham Lincoln? Or was it Evel Knievel? Introducing the new, redesigned 2000 Mitsubishi Montero Sport. For the hyperactive 9-year-old in all of us.
Today, millions of people are living fuller lives. Free to go and do whatever they please, whenever they please. All because of the extra protection they get from Depend. Leading store brands are 50% more likely to leak than Depend. So get Depend and get all the confidence you need to live life to the fullest.
Get all you want out of life with Depend.
Technology on the cutting edge tonight. Someone is always trying to build a better robot and very often succeeding. Tonight, quite by happenstance, Jack Smith's report about a whole new generation of robots never seen before now begins with an earthquake.
When an earthquake strikes, digging for survivors is slow and uncertain. But suppose you could use robots. Robots unlike any ever seen before that could change shape to wiggle through debris, transmit information from their sensors, even stand to form a protective shield over victims.
So this is made up of 24 modules, just like this, each of which has...
And each one is a robot in itself.
Each of which is a robot in and of itself, having a computer, sensors, and a motor on board.
Scientists are changing the way we think about robotics by assembling arrays of modules intelligent enough to interact and reconfigure themselves to suit the needs of the moment.
Individually, they can only do very small things, just move in this fashion. But when you put a lot of them together, you can do a lot more complicated things.
What scientists want to do is shrink the modules down until together they begin to resemble a living thing rather than a machine.
As you get smaller and smaller, you're able to fit hundreds, then thousands, and millions, hopefully, of modules into a usable package.
When they get very, very small, it gets to the point where it's almost like clay. You can approximate almost any shape you want. So you have this kind of a morphing robot that can change into different shapes and then do almost anything.
That's supposedly how the robot in Terminator 2 changed his shape. It's a revolutionary new way of looking at machines as almost living organisms.
We're beginning to kind of really think more about the whole notion of biological metaphors as a way we think about building devices for the future.
Because we're going to make them that small.
Make them that small, but also have some of the properties of organic systems that can take themselves apart, reassemble themselves, regrow themselves, reprogram themselves, and so on.
Scientists envision robotic clay that could change its shape and become a hammer, a screwdriver, any tool you needed. Or strings of robots so small they could be injected inside the body and would reassemble to repair a damaged heart. That, scientists believe, is the real future of robots. Jack Smith, ABC News, Palo Alto, California.
Very much the cutting edge. Here's a first connected to technology, and we hope others follow suit. A restaurant in New York has opened a lounge for people who simply must use their cell phones while they're at dinner. Waiters who spot people talking on their phones ask offenders to step into the cell phone only section, please. A restaurant survey done by Zagat says that people using cell phones in restaurants are the source of more complaints than anything else. When we come back, the flu that killed at least 20 million people, the epidemic of the century.
I may look young, but I still suffer from hot flashes. I discovered a natural way to deal with it. New Healthy Woman from the makers of Monistat. Healthy Woman's a soy menopause supplement that helps relieve hot flashes in a natural way. New Healthy Woman.
Right now at LensCrafters, you can get a complete pair of great-looking glasses for only $99 in your choice of hundreds of the latest styles.
The LensCrafters $99 complete pair sale.
Only $99. You can't afford to miss an offer like this.
Hurry, offer ends November 20th.
A lot of people have allergies. I have multi-symptom nasal allergies. It's the sneezing, itchy, runny nose, the nasal congestion. It's all of it. I told my doctor, I've had it. I want an allergy medicine made for my kind of allergies. He prescribed multi-symptom Flonase.
Flonase nasal spray once a day relieves all nasal allergy symptoms all day and night.
All it takes is Flonase.
The #1 prescribed nasal allergy spray. Even kids as young as 4 can use Flonase. For best results, use daily. If side effects occur, they are generally mild and may include headache, nosebleed, or sore throat. Call to learn more. Ask your doctor about multi-symptom Flonase.
When you get it all it takes is Flonase.
So instead of paying a separate commission every time you trade, you'd pay an annual fee. Trade all you want.
All I want?
Yeah, virtually unlimited.
Really?
Remember the financial plan we're working from here, Dad. The point is long-term capital appreciation.
I know.
You just don't want you sitting by the computer all day buying and selling stocks.
Yeah. Show me how I log on to your research.
Oh, that's easy. Yeah, investing is serious business, Dad.
I promise I'll do my homework, okay?
When pain shakes your world, it's time for Bengay SPA with site-penetrating action. It targets relief at the site of pain, and it has a light, fresh scent. Bengay SPA. It feels like a whole new day.
Tonight, teachers test your kids all the time, so why should they object to being tested? Are your kids getting a rotten education?
I would say that our teachers are the most ignorant teachers in the developed world.
What John Stossel learned, you should know. 2020 tonight.
Coming up next on Channel 2 News, just in time for holiday travel, we'll take you on a tour of PDX's brand new control tower and enjoy the final days of fall with a tour of the sights along the Columbia River. I'm Steve Dunn. News of the Northwest is next.
Finally this evening, how seriously do you take the flu? Do you take a flu shot? It is the season. In London, Ontario, the health department is telling people who work in nursing homes and retirement homes that they may have to stay at home without pay if they don't get a flu shot. Why worry so much about the flu? For that, you should ask your doctor. But at the end of a week in which we have paid a lot of attention to infectious diseases, for the century on Friday, this is how bad it once was. Tonight, the flu epidemic of 1918.
It was the most horrible time. By the hundreds they were dying. And no doctor could stop the epidemic.
We had little caskets for the little babies that stretched for 4 and 5 blocks, 8 high, 10 high.
In the spring of 1918, as Americans rushed to the aid of the Allies in World War I, a far worse enemy than the German Kaiser awaited them at home, a rare and deadly strain of the flu virus.
The influenza epidemic of 1918-1919 killed more people than combat did, and it killed them all over the world.
There are many theories as to how the virus began. The most popular one points to Fort Riley, Kansas, where in March 1918, 48 soldiers succumbed to a mysterious illness. That summer and fall, 1.5 million Americans crossed the Atlantic to join the Great War. And since some of those men came from Kansas, the same strange sickness reappeared in Europe. As it spread, the virus mutated, and soldiers were beginning to pick up nothing less than a plague. The disease spread so quickly throughout Spain, it was given the name the Spanish flu. But this virus recognized no nationality. Britain, France, and especially India and the United States were all struck by a pandemic like none in modern memory. Medicine had already developed a reputation as a miracle worker, but in this flu it had met its match. For a while, life in America went on as usual. Crowds gathered at Liberty Bond rallies in support of the war effort, unaware that they were passing the virus to each other by doing nothing more aggressive than breathing. But by September of 1918, everyone was aware that something deadly lurked among them, and fear became rampant.
People would die within days of contracting the flu. There was absolutely nothing that medical science could do about it.
San Francisco passed an ordinance requiring people to wear face masks in public. Chicago movie theaters removed patrons who were coughing. Signs were posted outside small towns telling travelers to go away. On the playgrounds in America, children sang a little tune.
I had a little bird. Its name was Enza. I opened up the window and influenza.
And influenza. And since no one knew how to combat the disease, folk remedies abounded.
I used to go to school with a little bag of camphor strung from my neck that's supposed to keep the flu away.
Everybody was chewing garlic in those days, garlic and milk.
In November, the First World War ended at a cost of almost 10 million lives. By 1918, the flu had claimed twice that many lives. 20 million people in the world, 600,000 Americans. Some people feared the epidemic was the beginning of the end of the world. And then, the mysterious flu virus of 1918 just as mysteriously disappeared.
Nobody had ever seen it before, and thank God after 1919 it mutated again, possibly into swine flu, into the pig population.
But it left the world in shock. The most terrible epidemic of the century. That's how bad it was. The path which that flu epidemic took right around the world is on our website tonight, thecentury.com. That is our report on World News Tonight, 2020 later. On Nightline this evening, Millennium Worries, what people feared and what actually happened in the year 999. I'm Peter Jennings. We hope you have a good weekend. Good night.
What you don't know about our nation's boys could hurt them. Now, an in-depth look at America's sons at the crossroads. For 4 days, reports from every ABC News program on This Week. From growing pains to growing up, Colin Powell talks about mentoring, plus Tipper Gore on boys and self-image. America's Sons begins Sunday on This Week. This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings than from any other.